Hello again, everybody. This is Derek, and I am coming back at you with another wargaming and miniature video. In this video, we're going to continue on with our Land of the Free boot camp. Land of the Free is a Osprey wargame rules for wargaming North America, like the American War of Independence or the French and Indian War. And this boot camp is an in-depth rules explanation tutorial. I recommend going back and starting with the first video, which is the introduction, and then it works through orders, the commanders, and shooting and melee. And in this video, we are going to be talking about discipline and morale. Okay, an element can suffer hits in multiple ways, from shooting to melee. Hits represents the physical and psychological effect that combat offers during the course of a battle. Hits portray wounded, killed, exhausted, mentally broken troops, generating an overall impact on a particular element or force. So as the battle rages, the hits will continue to accumulate on elements until they finally break and become combat ineffective. So a hit is not immediately assumed to be people shot in the head.
What if that man gets shot in the head?
It could be guys just cowering or retreating or crying to their mommy. With the exception of a rally order, there is no way to remove, pause, or permanently stop the collection of hits or the degradation of the element's discipline. When an element receives hits equal to or greater than its discipline, it will be forced to take a morale test. Every element has a discipline value. Whether the element reacts positively or negatively to the amount of physical and psychological damage it is suffering is determined by the element passing or failing the morale test. If the test is passed, the element will continue to degrade to the next level of discipline, but will stand fast and not withdraw. If the morale test is failed, the element will lose a level of discipline and withdraw in an attempt to remove itself from the danger. Immediately following the morale test, regardless of the results, the element will lose a level of discipline and will immediately apply the negative effects of that discipline level. So there are 4 levels of discipline. Only 2 of them need to be marked. And I personally use yellow and red markers, and I just use these wooden blocks to represent different levels of discipline. Okay, so let's take this New York regiment. With no markers on it, it's considered fit. An element well rested and prepared for combat. The soldiers may have never experienced the horrors of combat, or they are veterans of several battles. Either way, they walk into combat fresh and without any casualties or psychological trauma. So basically, it's the default fresh and fit. The next level, I mark yellow as cautious. That is called shaken. An element that is shaken will permanently remove 1 combat order from its normal allowance and suffer a -1 to all future morale tests. The effect of being shaken will be applied immediately. A shaken element must pass a morale test prior to declaring a charge. If the morale test is passed, the element will be able to declare a charge. If the morale test is failed, the element will be unable to charge and it will suffer a disorder marker. If the shaken element fails the morale test to charge, it will continue to receive orders per the normal rules. So if you wanted to charge, you got to make your morale check, and if you fail, you get a disorder marker, and then you continue to issue orders. Next level, I use red. So you just swap out the yellow for a red. Dangerous. He's close to being eliminated. It's called exhausted. An element that becomes exhausted will permanently remove one action die and one combat order from its normal allowance, as well as suffering the -1 to all future morale tests. These element modifiers include the effects of being shaken, hence the loss of a combat order. The effects of being exhausted are applied immediately. Yeah, so you lost the maneuver order from being shaken. When you become exhausted, you don't lose an additional combat order or maneuver order. You just lose the same maneuver order, and now you lose an additional combat order. The -1 for morale test for being shaken doesn't make it a 2. It's still just a -1. It basically just says you're not fit, so you get a -1. An exhausted element can only charge enemy elements if it successfully passes a morale test, and the charge will hit the flank of the target element. If the morale test has failed, the element will be unable to charge and it will suffer a disorder marker. An exhausted element that fails a morale test to charge will continue to receive orders per the normal rules. Okay, so if you are exhausted, you can only charge into the flank of an enemy and still require a morale test. And if you fail, you'll get a disorder marker, but you'll continue to be able to spend your orders. But remember, you've lost a maneuver and a combat order. Exhausted elements that start an order in an enemy's threat zone may not move closer to an enemy element, but may move away or out of the threat zone. Yeah, so if he starts in the threat zone, he can stay there or move away. But if he's not in this element's threat zone, he can't move into the threat zone. Exhausted elements that start an order in an enemy's threat zone may not move closer to the enemy element, but may move away or out of the threat zone. Okay, exhausted elements cannot hold, contest, or control objectives, and are considered to be broken when calculating whether or not the group or force is broken. So an exhausted element is just barely on the table. He can't hold terrain objectives, that is, or when you're trying to determine if a force is broken, he is counted towards that total. Okay, and then the final level is called shattered. An element that is downgraded to shattered is just removed from the table. You just pick it up. There's no need to mark it with a marker because he's no longer on the table. You just pick him up. Okay, morale test. Whenever an element performs a specific order or suffers enough hits, it must take a morale test. Orders that require a morale test must be taken prior to the order taking place. If the test is passed, the element will be able to perform the requested order. If the test is failed, the element may not be able to perform the order and might also suffer other debilitating effects. When the player is forced to take a morale test, they will roll 2 dice adding them together with the modifiers on this chart, and compare the results to the element or the commander's morale. It depends on if it's an element issue or if it's a command order type issue. There are 3 types of morale tests that elements may experience. Failing any type of morale test will automatically remove any stored maneuver or combat orders that the element has hoping to use in a later point. The first type of morale test, if failed, results in no negative consequences other than the inability to perform the action. These morale tests consist of declaring an inspirational charge, declaring a concentrated volley, rallying an element. The second type of morale test results in the element receiving a disorder marker if it fails the test. This morale test is commonly referred to as a disorder test because of the associated negative result. The actions that require a disorder morale test are issuing a forced order, basically giving them an order from your commander, declaring a formation change as a charge reaction, declaring a charge with a shaken element, declaring a charge in the flank with an exhausted element. The final type of morale test is taken when the element's discipline value has been met or exceeded by hits. If the element fails this morale check, then the element will lose a level of discipline and be forced to withdraw. If the element reaches a shattered status, it's removed from play rather than withdrawing. This test is also called a discipline test, and the element is required to take a morale test when one of the following conditions are met. The element has suffered a number of hits equal to or greater than the element's discipline value, or when the element's group is broken. Okay, withdrawing. 2 types of withdrawing moves that an element is likely to perform. There is withdrawing in good order and retiring in rout step. An element retiring in good order will move its required amount of maneuvers and will continue to face in the same direction that it faced prior to withdrawing. The withdrawal will move the retiring element directly towards the player's table edge. An element will retire in good order whenever it fails a discipline morale test, resulted by hits. An element fails a discipline morale test because of hits from shooting will receive a free turn to face the player's table edge, retire D3 maneuvers. Once the move is complete, the element will turn around and face relatively in the same direction. Retiring in rout step. An element retiring in rout step must face in the direction of its movement as it moves away from the enemy. The element will maintain its current formation and will receive a free turn to retire in rout step. The retiring element will always turn directly away from the cause of its withdrawal and move its required distance. An element will always retire in rout step if it fails a discipline morale test immediately following a melee, or if the group is broken. So shooting retires in good order, melee retires in rout step. An element's first retiring move when fleeing from melee or withdrawing from a charge will always be directly away from the enemy, forcing its flee. If there are any additional fleeing moves after the initial one, then the remaining withdrawal moves will be towards the player's table edge. If the element fails a discipline morale test because the group is broken, they will retire directly towards the player's table edge. If an element fails a discipline morale test, the element will lose one level of discipline and retire D3 maneuvers in route step. Artillery withdrawing. When unlimbered artillery elements suffer enough hits to cause a discipline morale test, but will still lower their level of discipline, they will automatically pass the morale test. Unlimbered artillery elements that are part of a broken group will not retire if they fail a discipline morale test, but will continue to lose a level of discipline. So unlimbered, they don't care. They automatically pass the morale test. Limbered artillery elements react exactly like infantry and cavalry when they are forced to withdraw. So limbered will withdraw, but unlimbered, they're pretty much locked in place. All right, rally. A force commander, that's your overall army leader, may issue a rally order to any element within his sphere of influence. A group commander may issue a rally order to any element within his group and within his sphere of influence. The commander must spend 1 CP command point, move into base contact with the element leader attempting to rally, and the element must take a morale test in order to rally successfully. A rally order is issued after group discipline morale tests, but right before the player intends to activate the element. If the order is passed, the effects of the rally are applied immediately. If the element passes, it may perform one of 3 actions. 1. The rallied element may remove any disorder markers. 2. The rally element may remove its current hits. 3. If the element has no hits, it may upgrade its discipline level from exhausted to shaken. Naturally, the element's discipline should be exhausted in order to take advantage of this rally option. An element may never upgrade from shaken to fit once it has become shaken. Yeah, so if you're fit, you're okay, but once you become shaken, you'll never become fit again. A commander that issues a rally order may not use his command points for any other element while it is attached to a rallying element. He's too busy attempting to rally and can't use his leadership skills anywhere else. The commander may continue to use CPs to influence the element he is attached to, but no one else. Regardless, if the element passes the rally test or not, the element will receive an unmodified maneuver order and an unmodified combat order to perform actions for the turn. The one maneuver and combat order the element receives reflects the -1 combat action for being shaken or exhausted. So players will not reduce the element's combat order to 0. The commander must attach himself to the rallying element until it activates in the following turn. Because as soon as you activate the group commander kind of backs up 1 inch. Okay, excess hits. An element may suffer hits from shooting or melee that exceed its discipline value during a given order or element's activation. When this occurs, the element will not suffer the additional hits, but will accrue a -1 modifier to its impending discipline test for each hit suffered over its discipline value. So if you have a 3 for your discipline, and if you receive 5 hits, you would need to make that discipline morale check, but you would have a -2, because that would be the excess. Once the discipline morale test has been taken, the element will degrade to the next discipline level, and all of the hits will be removed from the element. Broken groups. At the start of each turn, when a group commander and his group is activated, the player will check its status to determine if it is broken. Any element that has been shattered, removed from play, or starts the group activation exhausted counts as broken for purposes of determining a broken group. If there are more broken elements than there are non-broken elements, then the group is activated, then the group is considered broken. Yeah, so it says more than, so not equal to. So if you've got 4, you'd have to have 3 units broken. If you have 5, you also only need 3. But if you have 6 elements in your group, you would need to have 4 broken. The elements within the group will be required to take an immediate discipline morale test before any element is activated. If the element passes the discipline morale test, the element may activate and function as normal for the turn. If the element fails the morale test, it will lose a level of discipline and retire D3 maneuvers in route step toward the player's table edge. Ooh, that's bad. Elements failing a discipline morale test because the group is broken do not receive any maneuver or combat orders when it is activated. The element may only receive orders by the group or force commander if they issue command points such as rally or forced order. In the subsequent turns, the group will continue to check its status, and the elements will be required to make new discipline morale tests if the group remains broken. A group could be broken one turn and remove its broken status by the start of the following turn. This is the nature of warfare, as 1 minute victory is assured, and the next minute the army is calling a full retreat. Okay, broken forces. At the start of the turn, prior to rolling for initiative, if the force, that's your army, has more broken groups than unbroken groups, the signal for a ceasefire will take place and the game will immediately end. The player with a broken force will concede the game regardless of any other victory conditions. So that's one way to win the game. That's to break more groups, basically causing your opponent to rout or flee from the table. Supported elements. An element that is supported will gain confidence and become less likely to fold under the pressure of combat. The reputation of the unit of soldiers is continuously scrutinized by fellow countrymen, who often encourage the men to stand their ground. An element gains a morale bonus when a friendly element is within 6 inches of the friendly elements. An element gains a morale bonus when a friendly element is within 6 inches and the friendly element's discipline level is fit. The distance is measured from any part of the leader of the element forced to take the morale test to the closest part of a friendly element in support. The bonus is only gained once, no matter how many elements fulfill this condition. Elements in other discipline statuses other than fit have become too concerned with their own morale to lend support to another struggling element. So if you've got a fit unit within 6, it'll give you a bonus. Disorder markers. Throughout the game, elements will receive punishing volleys, cannonball shots, and become disorganized from various other battlefield conditions. Maintaining an element's formation is of paramount importance for officers. So when battlefield conditions threaten the integrity of a unit, they must work diligently to reestablish order. To represent the difficulty for officers to keep order on the battlefield, an element will receive disorder markers throughout the game. Disorder markers are cumulatives. So each time a new event occurs to cause a disorder marker, the element will keep accruing them until the element spends a maneuver order to remove them or a commander issues a rally order. During gameplay, disorder markers will hinder an element's performance by minimizing its abilities to maneuver, reducing its combat effectiveness, and lowering its morale. If an element is activated and has disorder markers, then it must first make every attempt to remove them before any other orders can occur. For each disorder marker, the element must spend one maneuver order to remove it. So yeah, basically you pause, you hesitate, you use up your maneuver orders to get rid of those, to basically reorganize your lines, get back into order. If the element has more disorder markers than maneuver orders, then it may perform other actions such as firing or conducting melee, but only after the element spends as many maneuver orders as possible to remove the disorder markers. An element that has disorder markers may be issued a forced order to perform a maneuver or combat order, as long as the element spent its normal maneuver allowance to remove as many disorder markers as possible. So yeah, so if you've got 3 orders but you have 4 disorder markers, you can spend your 3 maneuver orders to remove those 3 disorder markers, and then your commander can issue a forced order, and you can actually move at that point, but you would still have that disorder marker. Elements may spend maneuver actions to remove disorder markers throughout their activation, but remember, if an element starts the turn with disorder markers, it must attempt to remove as many as possible before performing any other actions. Leaving the field of battle. There are many instances when an element may immediately leave the table. Under most circumstances, the departure will be caused by elements withdrawing from their failing a discipline morale test or fleeing from melee. If the element's discipline level is fit or shaken and it has moved that takes any portion of its stands off the table, then it must immediately take a morale test. If the test is passed, the element will remain on the table, touching the board edge where the element almost left the table. If the morale test is failed, the element will remove from the board and is considered broken. If the element is exhausted and has any of its portion of its stands move off the board edge, then it is removed from play and is considered broken without a morale test. Okay, so that was morale. That was pretty straightforward. Do a little recap real quick. You have level of discipline, fit, shaken, exhausted, and shattered. You take hits, and if you equal or exceed your discipline level as per your statistics, then you make a morale test. If you pass, you degrade 1 level of discipline and remain in place. But if you fail, you degrade 1 level of discipline and withdraw. There are certain modifiers to your morale tests, like if you're in march column, if you're shaken or shattered, if you're disordered, if you're broken. You get a bonus if you're in battle line, or if your commander is attached, or if you're supported by a fit element in cover or in defense, you retire. There's two ways to retire: good order and rout. The easy way is if you're shot and you're required to withdraw, you retire in good order. If it's due to a melee, then you withdraw in rout step, basically facing away from the enemy. Commanders can attach to a unit and attempt to rally them. They can get rid of disorder markers and hits, and maybe even upgrade them from exhausted to shaken, but never from shaken to fit. Excess hits cause minuses on your morale test. When more than half of your elements are shattered or exhausted, then your element or your group is broken. When a unit is broken, all of the elements have to make a morale test to continue to fight. Otherwise, they withdraw towards their table edge. If more than half of your groups are broken, then your force is broken, and that ends the game immediately. In the next video, we're going to discuss scenery. Scenery is things like linear obstacles, area, terrain, buildings. All right, so thank you for coming out and checking out this episode of our boot camp for Land of the Free. Be sure to stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, make sure you hit the notification icon so that when I upload the next video for the Land of the Free boot camp, you'll be notified of that. And I'll catch you in the next video.